All right, welcome to this explainer. If you're an infrastructure admin gearing up for the Nutanix NCP-MCI 7.5 certification, you are exactly where you need to be today. We are going to completely demystify a highly specific, but honestly absolutely critical topic for the exam, Prism Central deployment sizes. We're not just going to read off a list of raw numbers either. We're going to methodically break down the architectural logic behind these sizes. We'll take it at a nice, steady pace to make sure you truly grasp the core concepts, learn how to dodge those tricky exam traps, and understand how this actually applies in the real world. Okay, let's take a quick look at our roadmap. We've structured this into 6 logical parts. We'll kick things off with why sizing matters, then outline the 4 deployment sizes, and walk through some real-world examples. After that, we'll get into high availability scaling, expose some common exam edge cases, and finally wrap up with a rapid-fire summary of the absolute must-know facts. Section 1. Why Sizing Matters, the Foundation of Cluster Health. Before we start throwing around gigabytes and vCPUs, let's make sure we're on the exact same page about our core component. PC, or Prism Central, is Nutanix's centralized management tool. Think of it as the overarching brain for your entire Nutanix environment. It gives you multi-cluster control, deep monitoring, and handles the deployment of advanced features. So why does the sizing of this brain matter so much, and why does Nutanix test you on it? Well, it's because getting your sizing right on day one literally dictates what features you can actually run. If you under-provision your Prism Central instance right out of the gate, your management plane simply won't support the advanced capabilities your data center is going to need tomorrow. It's that simple. Moving right along to Section 2, the 4 deployment sizes. Let's look at the actual configurations you have to choose from. We have 4 base configurations to work with: XSmall, small, large, and extra large. Now here's a massive tip for the exam. While all 4 sizes exist, you really need to focus your energy on contrasting the bottom 2, XSmall and small. The large and extra large sizes, those are generally reserved for massive, specialized scale-out deployments. But the exam heavily targets your ability to distinguish between the baseline requirements and the feature limits of the XSmall and small footprints. Here is the absolute contrast you need to memorize. I really want you to permanently etch the recommended small deployment specs into your brain: 6 vCPU, 28 gigabytes of memory, and 500 gigabytes of storage. This is your standard recommended starting point for the vast majority of production environments. Now contrast that with the XSmall setup, which squeaks by on just 4 vCPU, 18 gigabytes of memory, and 100 gigabytes of storage. The XSmall is a very specialized single-node instance. It is intended strictly for small-scale deployments running very limited workloads. And if you do decide to opt for that XSmall single-node footprint to save some resources, be hyper-aware of this strict limitation. The underlying host cluster, the one actually running the Prism Central VM, must be running AOS, which stands for Acropolis Operating System, version 6.8 or later. Now, you can use that XSmall PC to manage clusters running older versions, sure, but the specific cluster hosting the XSmall VM itself, that has to hit that 6.8 minimum requirement. Section 3. Real-world sizing examples. Application in the field. Let's cement this knowledge by walking through a couple of concrete, real-world scenarios. Picture this. You are designing an edge deployment. You have exactly 3 clusters. Looking purely at the raw numbers, this sounds absolutely perfect for the XSmall size, right? Because XSmall officially supports managing up to 5 clusters. But wait a second. The business requirements clearly state that you must deploy Flow virtual networking to handle microsegmentation. So, which size do you actually choose? The answer? You absolutely must use a small deployment. Even though your overall cluster count is technically low enough for XSmall, that XSmall configuration instantly disqualifies itself. Why? Because it simply does not have the horsepower to support advanced features like Flow virtual networking. This is a classic, textbook exam scenario where hard feature requirements completely override your raw cluster count capacity. Okay, let's try a second scenario. Let's say your team heavily relies on automating your application deployments, which means you absolutely need access to the Nutanix marketplace. You're trying to be efficient and save some compute resources, so you consider deploying the XSmall instance. Is this going to work? Nope, not going to work. Once again, the underlying why here is a hard feature limitation. The Nutanix documentation is extremely explicit about this. The marketplace is just not supported on XSmall Prism Central deployments. If you need the marketplace, a small deployment is your absolute bare minimum baseline. XSmall is strictly for basic, bare-bones capabilities, like core VM and host management. Nothing fancy. Section 4, High Availability Scaling. Let's talk about what happens to our resources when we need to add fault tolerance. HA, or high availability. It's a lifesaver, right? By default, Prism Central is deployed as a single virtual machine. But as we all know, a single VM is a single point of failure. Enabling high availability fundamentally transforms your deployment into a scale-out architecture. It provides the redundancy you need so your entire management plan can seamlessly survive an individual node failure. 3. I really want that number to sink in. When you're running through the deployment and you check that Enable High Availability box, you are telling the system to scale out. It is going to deploy exactly 3 Prism Central VMs. This means your initial resource requirements are instantly multiplied by 3. If you're deploying a small PC with HA, you don't just need 6 vCPU and 28 GB of RAM anymore. You need 3 times that amount distributed across your cluster to support those 3 management VMs. And to manage those 3 distinct VMs smoothly, HA mandates the use of a VIP, a virtual IP address. This VIP acts as the single, highly resilient access point for you and your admin team. You just log into the VIP, and the system seamlessly handles directing your traffic to an active, healthy Prism Central node working behind the scenes. Section 5, Exam Traps and Edge Cases. Let's shift strictly into a test-taking mindset and uncover a few of the trickier areas you might run into. Okay, listen up, because this is a classic exam gotcha regarding how memory is reported in the UI. When you enable HA on an AHV or Acropolis hypervisor cluster, the hypervisor purposefully reserves a chunk of memory to guarantee that VMs can actually restart if a node fails. Now, the Prism Element main dashboard displays your total memory usage, and it includes this HA failover reservation in that total. But if you navigate over to the analysis dashboard, the memory usage graph there only shows the memory currently being used by running VMs. It does not include the HA reservation. You definitely need to know which dashboard is showing you what. A couple more edge cases to file away. First, remember how we just talked about scaling out to 3 VMs for high availability? Well, you literally cannot do that with an XSmall deployment. XSmall does not support the scale-out feature at all. It is forever trapped as a single node instance. Second, while we already established that the marketplace isn't supported on XSmall, you also need to know that it's completely unsupported if your underlying Nutanix cluster is running the Hyper-V hypervisor. To use Marketplace, you have to be running either Nutanix HV or VMware ESXi. Section 6. Key facts to memorize. We are in the home stretch, so let's consolidate everything we've talked about into a rapid-fire review. Fact 1. There are exactly 4 deployment sizes: XSmall, small, large, and extra large. Fact 2. You have to permanently memorize the baseline small specifications. Say it with me: 6 vCPU, 28 GB of memory, and 500 GB of storage. Fact 3. XSmall is a severely limited, single-node instance meant only for basic use. It maxes out at managing 5 clusters, requires AOS 6.8 on the host, and completely lacks support for advanced features like the Marketplace or Flow. Fact 4. Enabling high availability scales your deployment out to exactly 3 VMs. That means it triples your required compute resources, and it absolutely mandates the use of a virtual IP for administrator access. So I'll leave you with this somewhat provocative thought to challenge your practical knowledge. Have you mentally verified your own infrastructure's Prism Central size and HA configuration before sitting for this exam? Don't just read about it. Log into your clusters today. Click through those dashboards. Verify these specs in your real-world environment. Applying this knowledge practically is far and away the best way to ensure it sticks. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and best of luck on your NCP-MCI 7.5 exam. You've got this!